and Mark. Alright, welcome back to the Dungeon Pub, everybody. Once again, I am your humble bartender, and today we're gonna kind of branch out from our videos about how to make a character, how to get inspiration for a character, and we're gonna get into the actual creating of a character using the book, using a character sheet. Feel free to watch those videos once again. If you have an idea already, then this is exactly for you, and this video is going to be aimed at those people who've never made a character before. You don't know how it's done. Before we get into everything, keep in mind that the book is there for you, right? The book's idea, the main purpose behind it is to literally do this, to allow you to make a character for yourself without the help of anybody else. That being said, go talk to your DM as well, because your DM is going to help you out, and he's going to tell you, or she, right? She's going to tell you all about your character, your race, your class, everything that you're going to need to know before you sit down and play. With that in mind, let's get into the meat and potatoes of things. Opening up the book, you're going to notice that it is literally a compendium of D&D stuff, right? And chapter number 1 states step-by-step characters beyond first level and stuff like that. So step-by-step, what it means is that after a brief introduction, you're gonna be presented with some information about the system of D&D, the dice, how everything plays out into the game. And what you need to know before you go further into the book is that Dungeons and Dragons has been and will be in the future based on the D20 system, meaning the 20-sided dice. So how does that come into play? Well, everything in the game is decided by that dice, and certain things in the game, especially when it comes to characters and NPCs, has modifiers that get added or subtracted from that initial D20 roll, and that's going to determine the outcome of pretty much every single action in the game. Feel free to read all about that, talk to your DM, and very quickly you're going to get the hang of it. Just rolling a few times, you're going to see how it works. The idea of the D20 system is that it's a system meant to quantify things that are not real. Okay, the RPG you're about to be playing with your friends is based in a fantasy realm. It's based on fantasy principles, and the D20 system is there to quantify things like attacking, casting a spell, evading certain things, and just overall how you use your skills and abilities. It's actually kind of flexible, right? Every game actually that we're going to be talking about in this channel for this current time, including Pathfinder, is based on this D20 system. In 5th edition, the main things that are going to be added to the D20 are your attribute modifiers, and we're going to be talking about these in the next segment of this video, because before you choose a race, before you choose a class, before you start killing dragons and gaining ranks in the adventuring world, you're gonna learn how to go about this dice, this D20. There are other dice that are meant for other things like the D10, the D12, but the D20 is the one you're gonna be using the most. And what's the whole gig? Well, every character, every quantified thing that is a player character or a non-player character in the game has ability scores, and there are 6 of them, right? You have your strength, dexterity, and constitution, which are your physical attributes, and then you have intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, which are your mental capacity. And well, what can I say? I mean, strength is just the measure of natural athleticism and bodily power. It's essential for swinging a cumbersome, sharp object into somebody's person, right? Of course, it's meant for other things as well, like athleticism, jumping, running, and stuff like that. So you kind of get the point. Strength is how well you can exercise your physical ability onto the world around you. And if you're playing a character like the barbarian or the fighter or the paladin, then strength is going to be essential for you. Number 1, again, swinging weapons into people's faces, but also number 2, shoving, grappling, tackling creatures to the ground, withstanding effects that would otherwise push you or disarm you, and just overall, ability with weapons. So that's your strength, and there are some races in the game that give you an additional count of this ability just because you are a member of that race, like the Mountain Dwarf, the Dragonborn, which are these large draconic creatures, the Half-Orcs, because they're naturally very strong. So this kind of branches into every other aspect of the game. And I'm gonna say it right now. We're gonna take this metaphor and we're gonna just keep rolling with it. But let's say that your character has a strength score of 12, right? So that's gonna net you a modifier of +1. We're gonna be talking about that in a second. And let's say that you're trying to shove a creature off a cliff, because trust me, in D&D, you're gonna be doing that, right? It's more common than you think. So you go behind that creature, you shove it, and you roll the d20, right? Number one, because you know this is right now the d20 is gonna measure how well you're gonna be performing in that, but also because this is the backbone of the system. This is how everything is gonna be quantified. So you roll the dice and you get, let's say, a 10. Onto that 10, you don't add the 12, you add the +1, because the +1 is meant to kind of simplify things, and I'm gonna tell you how to derive those numbers in a second, but that's a total of 11. So depending on that side of the creature's size, girth, you know, poise, overall, or maybe a defensive roll that the DM decided that the creature should make, you either succeed in turning that creature into an avian wannabe, or you fail and the creature turns around. You get to roll this other thing called initiative. In any case, this is how it works. This is how everything in the game is gonna work, and it gets obviously easy at some point. You're gonna be suggesting, you know, certain ways to do this to your DM, especially when the need arises. But moving past strength, you get to dexterity, which measures your physical agility, reflexes, balance, and poise. It's very essential for monks, rangers, and rogues, because they are the stealthy, quick, finesse characters. Also, the ranged weapons are deriving their statistics from dexterity. So again, to kind of have a little simulation, if you're attacking with a melee weapon like a longsword, then you're gonna choose the attack action. You're gonna have a target like, you know, maybe the person that you just tried to shove off the cliff but failed. So you swing that sword, and before the sword hits, you have to roll the d20. So if on the d20 you get a certain number, like let's say 15, you add your strength modifier to that, which is a +1, you get a 16. And if that 16 is enough, like your DM is gonna tell you, then you get to do damage, because your hit succeeds in passing that creature's defense. It's the same for dexterity. If you're shooting a longbow at somebody or something, you roll the dice, you add your modifier for dexterity, which could be a +1 or a +2 or plus, depending on what the count is, and you know, either you succeed or fail. Races that can get you a dexterity bonus are the elves, halflings, forest gnomes, and humans, because you know, elves and halflings naturally quick, and forest gnomes are very, very agile. Moving past that, constitution, the overall measurement of health, stamina, and vital force. So again, constitution and strength are different things, and constitution is essential for only one statistics on your character sheet and only one saving throw, right? So that's health, and the book is gonna tell you that it's important for everyone, right? There's no class that can go without constitution. The more you have, the better. Intelligence, measurements of mental acuity, information recall, and analytical skills. So think about that. And no, I'm not kidding. Like the idea behind intelligence is that this is your focused mind. This is the way your mind functions when you put your thoughts into something, right? You want to investigate an object, so you turn it over every side, you analyze the information, or you just want to remember something about a history book that you read, you know, 10 years ago. So this is your intelligence. This is how it works. It's very important for wizards and some varieties of rogues and fighters. And there is a dichotomy between intelligence and wisdom that we're going to discuss very briefly. But again, think about passive and active, right? Think about the borderline between feelings, senses, and your applied intelligence. Wisdom, on the other hand, which is a measurement of awareness, intuition, and insight, is kind of the other side of that argument, right? So are you going to be a smart guy or a wise guy, right? It's important for clerics and druids because they derive their power from their senses of the world, their ability to understand and have insight into things like the deities or nature. And at this point, you're kind of getting the idea. Intelligence is meant for those people who like to, actively perceive something, actively investigate their surroundings. While wisdom is more about this borderline between your intelligence and your feelings, right? If you think about the 5 senses, you don't actively listen for things at all times unless you specifically focus on something. But when you hear something, right, then that's your wisdom. And then ultimately, the sixth ability score is charisma, and it's a measurement of confidence, eloquence, which I possess to some degree, unlike in this particular video. Is this is not the measurement of how beautiful you are as a physical representation. This is more about how you feel about yourself, how you perceive what you're doing, how other people perceive you as a leader or maybe a villain. And it's important for bards and sorcerers and warlocks because they are the charisma casters, right? If you look at the sorcerer, for example, the sorcerer's power is derived from this internal power source, either due to some lineage or some event that happened in the past or at the day of your birth. And because this power is erupting from within you, your charisma is going to be the modifier for that power, because right, it's all about how confident you are, how well you can put reins on what you are doing. And that's the 6 attributes. That's all you have to work with. And trust me, it's more than it seems, because all of these get to branch out into different skills, different rules in the book about attacking and saving throws and movement and stuff like that. But there's one other modifier that's going to come into play in the D20 system of 5th edition, and that's the proficiency bonus. Proficiency is this standard linear progression that is only dependent on your level. It's not a statistic that you can increase in any way. It doesn't get decreased by anything. It's just there because you have spent some time of your life adventuring, and the more time that you spend, the more levels you're going to gain, and subsequently the larger your proficiency bonus is going to become. And the idea behind 5th edition's D20 system is that certain classes, certain races, and certain backgrounds are going to give you proficiency in certain abilities and certain skills. That's it. Like, if you're proficient in something, that just means that you get to circle that one thing out, and at all times your proficiency bonus gets to interact with that thing that you circled. So for example, if you are proficient in strength saving throws, then that means that whatever you roll on the dice, whether it's a 2 or a 19, then you get to add your strength modifier, which again, for the sake of that example, is a 12, which gives you a +1 modifier, and then you get to add your proficiency. But if you're not proficient in dexterity saving throws, then you only get to add your dexterity modifier. And talking more about ability scores and modifiers, the backbone of the system is the 2-point margin, right? So let's take the 10 and the 11, right? You can see that in the book there's an entire table about this. It's gonna very visually show you how it works, but very briefly, if you have a 10 or an 11 in any ability, let's take intelligence for example, because hey, it's easy to make a metaphor. If you have a 10 or an 11, you are an averagely intelligent person. You're not dyslexic, you're not stupid, you're not gonna be Shakespeare, okay? You're just there, right? You just can do what you can do. If you go below that, right, if you go and have a 9 or an 8, that gives you a modifier of -1. And at that point, you're slightly below average in terms of intelligence, which means that perhaps your speech is not exactly flowing, or, maybe you don't think about the things that you do way too often. Or, on the other side, if you get a 12 or a 13, because again, it's a 10 or an 11 is a +0, but a 12 already gives you a +1, so you're slightly above the average level of intelligence, meaning you can speak more fluently, you can compose your thoughts easier, and just go up or down. If you go below an 8, so that's a 6 or a 7, I think there was some rule somewhere that stated that if you have an intelligence that's less than 8, you are incapable of coherent speech. So you kind of get the point. If you get to a 14, then you are above the average for intelligence, and it shows, right? You are quite the astute person. You can make very good observations. You can speak very well, going all the way up to the 19 and the 20. So 18 and 19 are going to net you a +4. 16 and 17 are going to net you a +3. 14 and 15 are going to net you a +2. And the 20 and the 21 is a +5. Now, in this system, in the D20 system, the 20 is the maximum for an ability score, unless some rule decides otherwise. So for example, very quickly, the Barbarian at level 20 gets to have an ability which increases the maximum for Strength and Constitution to 24. Hey, nature boys, right? But other classes don't have that. Other races don't have that. And unless you find something in the game that's put there by your DM or some other rule states so, then the 20 is the maximum for your ability. Once again, I'm gonna say it, everything on your character sheet, pretty much, right, is gonna derive from those abilities. And depending on your class, depending on your idea, depending on your character's initial make, the ability scores are gonna be the foundation for everything that you do. But, you know, whatever you want to branch out into, whatever your idea is, that's gonna be dependent on your ability scores. So the next thing that's gonna come up are your skills, and they're gonna be decided by your background and your class. But before we get into that, let's go back to the part where I said that before you choose a class and a race, you have to kind of understand the D20 system. Well, that's the gist of it. That's the basics of it. And it's going to allow you to quantify every single action, every single idea that you have in the game with the help of your DM. And it really, really works well in that regard. It's meant to be approachable, accessible, flexible, easy to modify, easy to make a rule around, right? Because trust me, I make a lot of those, and you know, it doesn't always work out, but most of the times it works. You know, it works for all kinds of situations. And in this theater of the mind world, you're gonna notice that players get very, very creative. You're gonna be very, very creative. You're gonna want to do things that are not necessarily quantified by a specific rule, and the D20 system is meant to do exactly that, to allow your DM to tell you how that's gonna play out. So moving along, the next part of creating your character is going to be choosing a race. That's the most fundamental thing about your character. So go back to your idea. Again, we're not going to go over every race and every class for two reasons. Number one, it's going to be a very, very long time, and I'm not sure if one video is going to be enough. And number two, because there are already videos out there that are in our channel that are going to tell you all about the races, all about the classes. We're going to have a special series for every class, essentially going into the basic overview, customization, how to go about it, and even some stuff for you know, the more advanced people, or you know, if you've already played a few games and you already kind of get the gist of it, you can kind of move on into the more advanced things. But we're gonna have that. There are gonna be annotations in this video. You can click on those, kind of check it out. For the races, you can just, you know, up and read. I mean, if you like a race, if you like a particular race right now, or you haven't picked one yet, but you're looking over them going, well, oh no. Well, you know, this book is here for you, and there are other races other than the ones in this book. But for the purpose of this video, I'm not gonna go over every single one of them. You kind of get the point, you know, dwarves, elves, dragonborn. You kind of get the idea. Once you get your race and once you pick your class, then what's important is to understand what you have to put in your character sheet. So for the purpose of this, let's use the dwarf for a basic example. And without giving out too many details, you're going to look at that page and you're going to notice that at some point you're going to get to traits. It's right below the dwarf names, the suggested ones. And dwarf traits start with an ability score increase. Your constitution increases by 2 because dwarves are stout. And they have beards, which again adds constitution, I'm telling you right now. But then it tells you about age, alignment, size, and speed, stuff like that. So the age and alignment, age up to you, again, unless you're, you know, dependent on your idea. Like you want to build this old school dwarf, very grizzled, you know, veteran of many wars. You can pick whatever you want. Honestly, there's no rule that tells you, well, if you want to be this class, you have to be this. No. This is all about what you want to do. Alignment, that's kind of different. The alignment system in 5th edition, kind of like previous editions, depends on your initial idea, but also your actions in the game, and it's also very dependent on your DM. So go, you know, ask the guy or girl about that, and he's gonna tell you all about the alignment. Size, very important. It's gonna tell you what your average size can be, how far above or below you can go that. But the second sentence in that category is the more important one, because for dwarves it says your size is medium. All right, so depending on that, your character can be either small or medium, maybe large. I'm just throwing that out there because there are no races right now that can be large creatures, but hey, you never know, this is D&D. So because your size is medium, because you're not a small creature, then different rules apply to you, and that's very important to have in your character sheet. And then also your speed, your base walking speed for the dwarf is 25. Usually it's 30, but because dwarves are slightly shorter than everybody else, their stride is not that big, so 5 feet less. And then it's gonna tell you all about the nifty little things that the race itself is gonna offer to your character. Just because you're a dwarf, you get dark vision, dwarven resilience, dwarven combat training, all these things. All the races have them. All the races have different ones. Some share the same abilities, like dark vision, for example, or some of the trainings. But other than that, it's also going to show you the different varieties of dwarves. For example, dwarves have 2 varieties. There are more in the additional content, the additional books. But for right now, looking at just the player's handbook, there are hill dwarves and mountain dwarves, and you kind of get the idea. What's important for your character sheet is, again, the ability score, the alignment, because there's a place where you have to type that in, the speed. Again, all these little abilities are dark vision, dwarven resilience. You're going to have them on your character sheet just because they're there for you. Think of them as passives. And it's good to always have access to those to kind of see, okay, so, we're in this cave, but I have dark vision, so can I do a perception check? Aha. And tool proficiencies. Again, on the lower left of the character sheet, there's going to be a place called proficiencies in languages, and that's where you input any proficiency that the background, or rather the race, gives you, any languages that you can know. For example, dwarves speak Dwarvish in common, obviously. So that's about it. And then moving on to the class. The class descriptions in the book are very detailed. They're very, very fun to go over. For the purpose of this video, we're going to go over the fighter, just because it's kind of accessible. And what are you looking for? Well, starting from class features, like everything before that is kind of fluff. It's meant to kind of give you an idea, to inspire you. But also there's the entire table going from level 1 to 20. It's going to tell you what your proficiency is going to be, what your features are what your features are going to be at every given level. And then it kind of gets into the important stuff. So starting from class features, the important part here is the hit dice, right? Every class has its own specific hit dice. So for the fighter, it's a D10. For other classes, it might be lower or higher, right? Barbarians have a D12. And then it tells you how to calculate your HP. Very, very important at every tier of play. So at first level, it's 10 plus your constitution modifier. So again, we're talking about that. If your constitution is, let's say, 16, then that nets you a modifier of +3. And at level 1, your health is going to be 10 plus 3, so that's 13. But moving past that, going to level 2, it's going to be the roll of the dice, or you can just pick 6 because it's the average, it's the middle +1. So whatever you roll, you get to add 3, and that's gonna be added to your health pool as soon as you level up. So if you're level 2, have 13 HP, you roll the dice, and let's say you roll a 6, so you get to add the 3 from Constitution. Again, proficiency doesn't play into that. Doesn't matter if you have a proficiency in the saving throw. This is a different calculation. That's a total of 9, which you get to add to the 13, and you get a total of 22. Then you move past that, you go to proficiencies. So once again, you're looking at the lower left of your character sheet. There you get to add the proficiencies in all armor and shields. That's because you're a fighter, right? Again, dwarves also have proficiencies in warhammers and throwing hammers and stuff like that. But the warrior, or rather the fighter class, is going to give you proficiencies in armor and weapons, meaning all simple and martial weapons, all armors and shields. Fighters are cool, right? But the idea behind the fighter class is that you need to have these proficiencies because that's what fighters do. They take advantage of all that stuff. So again, that's where you add those. It's good to know that you have proficiencies in these things. It's also important for attacking and the saving throws. Again, kind of like that little example that we had. Let's say that you find this really cool battle axe, right? And you want to wield it. Well, do you have proficiency? Yeah, because you're a fighter. Also, because you're a dwarf. So if you weren't a fighter, you would have that proficiency because you're a dwarf. But because you're a fighter, then, it doesn't matter if you're a dwarf or a halfling or half-orc, you can use that weapon. And what does that mean? Well, you can technically use it always, but now you get to add your proficiency modifier for everything that you're going to do with that weapon. Primarily swinging it to somebody's face. So that's how it works. That's how everything in the system works. If you have proficiency in something, whether it's a skill or a saving throw, get to add the proficiency and also the corresponding ability score modifier. So moving past that, still looking at the character sheet, still looking at the fighter class, you see saving throws, right? Strength and constitution, meaning that off the bat, you have proficiency in saving throws in those 2 categories, strength and constitution. Others still get to use your ability score, but you don't get to add proficiency. So you're really, really good at withstanding things with your strength and, you know, resisting things with your constitution. But if dexterity ever comes up or intelligence, then, you know, you're not as good as other classes or races. Skills, choose 2 from the following list. And there's, you know, a number of skills here. So obviously you get to choose 2. And that's up to you. You know, this is up to your build, up to what you want to build, up to what you want to do. If you have a specific character in mind already, then think about that character. Think of whether he's acrobatic or athletic, whether he would have, you know, proficiency in history or, you know, perception, stuff like that. And the way that skills work is kind of like saving throws and attacking with weapons. You know, whenever it comes up, your DM is going to tell you, hey, you know, make a perception check. Or in specific cases, you're going to be looking at your DM going, can I make a perception check? And he's going to be going, I don't know. But the idea is that you get to roll the d20. And let's say that you get a 7, right? So it's a perception check. So that's your wisdom. So you have a wisdom of 12. That gives you a +1 modifier, which you add to the 7, get an 8. But then you're also proficient in perception, right? And that means that you get to add your proficiency to the roll, which is at different levels a different thing, but at level 1 it's going to be a +2, so that's a total of 10. And there you go. You roll 10, your DM is going to tell you whether you can hear what's coming to eat you or not. So that's how it works. That's how everything works. Moving right along, just because your character sheet is going to demand a few other things. Equipment. This is the starting equipment for your class. And it kind of branches off into 2 different things because you have choice number 1 or choice number 2. And for the fighter, the very first thing you get to choose between is a chainmail or a leather armor and the longbow with 20 arrows. So what do you think this is for, right? This is kind of there for to get you thinking, to be able to branch out into different things, different ideas, different builds. And if you want to be a bulky melee fighter with a shield and a weapon, then, you know, get the chainmail. Or here's an idea, get the leather and the longbow, because maybe you want to be versatile. Maybe you want to be, you know, able to tackle any situation. Choice number 2, again, martial weapon and a shield, or 2 martial weapons. So would you like to have the variety? Do you really want that shield? What types of martial weapons would you take, or is it just the one? And this is the same for every class. What we're going over, the proficiencies, the hit points, every single class begins like this before it gets into the abilities. Now, I'm not going to go into any abilities right now, just because we're going to have a separate video for every single class. And hey, this is it. This is the D20 system. This is how it works. Just take the book, start from page number 1, and just start rolling. And you're gonna see very quickly that creating a character is not only easy, but it's kind of fun, right? And very quickly you're gonna be going, oh, okay, so you know, I add this to this, this to this. Later on, your DM is gonna tell you if you missed anything right before the game. He's gonna say, oh, okay, so maybe, you know, calculate this differently. But other than that, that's it. And just briefly scrolling through the pages of the book right now, I can see that it starts with the D20 system, right? And that's essential for you to know. But then, talking about the system very briefly, it then starts to go into different things about adventures and, you know, the pillars of adventuring and choosing a class and how to calculate your level. It explains the ability score. So all of what we just talked about is right there in the beginning of the book. And just because it's so fundamental, it's really well laid out there. So there's no way for you to, you know, miss something or miscalculate something at you know, at a later point. Hey, that's it. If you already have an idea, if you've already figured out what you want to be, who you want to be, if you already have a set of people that you want to play with, and there's this person over there that you know, putting up his or her glasses going, well, you know, please sit down, then you are about to have a lot of fun, and I really envy you. I remember the first time I played the game. So yeah, just after this video, there's gonna be additional videos about classes, races, still, again, beginner things that are meant to enlighten you, give you a pointer, give you a tip, or just, you know, sparkle your creativity. So if you're not playing D&D yet, why? I am your humble bartender. I'm really happy to be DMing tomorrow, actually, and, you know, go play some D&D. Send us your messages, send us your tweets, and just have a good time.